ever have someone agree with everything you said and still not move forward? That's not a yes, that's a false yes. Today, John and I are breaking down why agreement feels like progress, but rarely leads to commitment. Let's dig in.
Welcome to Own the Room, for people operating where the stakes are real.
Pitches, negotiations, leadership conversations that don't come with a second chance.
Here, you'll learn to control perception, read the room, and thrive in high-stakes communication. Now here's Jake Stahl, who's going to help you turn communication
into your unfair advantage.
John, last week we talked about how to stop from being ghosted. And we talked about some of the things that are causing ghosting inside a conversation. Well, this week I thought we'd take it a step further and we'd look at one of the things that causes ghosting, and that's the false yes, the false commitment by the customer. John, I'm sure you've heard this before. Somebody says, "Hey, John, that sounds great. All is well. Sounds good." And they still don't move forward.
Oh, all the time. It feels like, well, what am I doing wrong? Do I need to follow up in a certain way? Whether it is the ghosting or it's just getting a no later after you were so sure that you had that yes in the bag. It's puzzling. It's frustrating.
Yeah. And John, as we talked about last week, there's a bunch of causes of people ghosting you. But this week, we're going to talk a little bit about the false yes. So this is when that customer goes, "Makes sense to me. I agree with that. Yep, we're dealing with that too." And your brain says, "Yay, we're moving forward." But nothing happens. No step, no decision, no urgency. And John, the focal point today is going to be that agreement is passive, where commitment is active, and most conversations never make that jump.
So it's almost like there is a larger gap between agreement and commitment than we realize. We think agreement equals commitment, or at least is very close. But there's something in between. There's this space that we need to traverse from agreement to actual commitment.
Yeah. And there's a couple of reasons that we see that void and we never cross it. And the first is agreement in our brains causes this false sense of progress. So you think you're moving forward, but actually what they're doing with the false yes is they're just validating you. So they're just saying, "Yep, okay, got it. Good, John. We're all set." And what's actually happening is the buyer is staying in what we would call observer mode. So they're saying, "Yep, that makes sense," which merely is saying to you, "I understand," but it's not saying, "I'm in." So we need to get them from "I understand" to "I'm in." And the reason our brain digs this or absorbs it is it delays the real objections. So we think to ourselves, if they're agreeing, they're not pushing back, so this is good. So I'm going to accept this. But the problem is the real friction is hidden. We don't see it. And because we want progress in our brains, we don't try to uncover it. On the buyer's side, though, there's a different psychology taking place. By doing this false yes, it protects them from risk. See, agreement is safe. So to agree is protecting them. If they agree, you go away, everything's settled. Where if they make a commitment, that brings in accountability, exposure, consequences, and that triggers alarm bells. So they stay in agreement. That false yes, that false agreement is no commitment on the call. And so there's no action after the call.
So it's almost like if, a door-to-door salesperson comes up and they're trying to get that yes momentum and they're like, "I just got one the other day from the window and door company. Hey, have you seen us on TV? Yeah, I've seen your commercials on TV. You got any big projects planned for this summer? Yep. Yeah, I got a couple that I'm going to be doing around the house. So there's this momentum that's built, and they could be seeing that as, okay, this person might be interested in windows and door services that we're selling. Problem is, I'm trying to get rid of them as fast as possible, is all I'm trying to do.
Yeah. And see, John, this is the problem with that yes momentum. And we've talked about this on other episodes. When you're getting somebody to just say yes, you're covering the friction and you're creating this false forward momentum in your head that says, hey, this is going well. Woohoo, they're agreeing, everything's good. And we're taught by our sales coaches that the more they agree, they're more likely to agree. But the thing the sales coaches don't tell you is the more they agree, the less you listen and the less you bring up real objections. And that keeps your close rate at 10 to 20%. And ironically, John, in the home improvement industry, the close rate sits at a staggeringly low 20 to 30%.
All because of, or partially anyway, because of that yes momentum. And what does that really
Correct.
cause you to do? You mentioned you stop listening. We know listening is such an important part of the strata framework and sales in general. So how come yeses and false optimism, this fake hype, get you to stop listening? Seems like you'd want to lean in even more.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And the answer, unfortunately, is ridiculously simple. When we're speaking to someone, we're actively looking for agreement. And when we get agreement, that literally spurs the reward zones of our brain. Yeah, we've got them going. Yeah, we're doing good. And we talk about how it pushes the buyer forward with yeses, but very few people talk about how it pushes us forward with yeses. So as
Mm.
I get more yeses, I start to relax because my game plan's working. So I'm good to go. And as soon as I start to relax, I start to rely on that sales script or that set of questions that's going to get that yes momentum. All of a sudden, I'm disengaging because I'm on autopilot. And autopilot is a problem.
Especially when you're dealing with somebody who's about to make a high trust commitment to you. And that's a big, big deal. And we sometimes
Yeah.
take it so lightly, whereas the other person's making a critical decision, maybe in their lives, depending on your service. So, what could have that window and door, for example, salesperson have done to not confuse agreement with my commitment?
Good question. And I've compiled 5 things you can do to get through this false yes that can lead to ghosting. So, the first thing they could have done, John, was translate your agreement into action. So,
Mm.
when you would say something like, that makes sense, they could have continued to bring you along and say, does it make sense enough to act on? So, John, when you have somebody and you're talking about your podcasting and production services, and you say to them, you should really get involved with the podcast, it's going to help you get your name out there and bring in clients. And they say that makes sense. Your follow up should be, does it make sense enough to act on? And what I'm doing is I'm taking their brain from understanding mode to decision mode.
It sounds so bold and aggressive. Like, all right, it makes sense, but are you actually going to do anything about it?
Well, when you say it like that,
You're just saying the tone and the words that you choose do really matter here.
well, you're getting them to start to commit. So, yeah, I get, John, that it makes sense to you, but it doesn't make sense enough for you to take action.
Mhm. That's the other piece of it is I feel like, well, you might get a no. They might say, "Well, no, not yet." That's where the objections might come out.
Correct. And we want the objections. And I can't emphasize that enough. That's the other drawback to this yes chain is we're not allowing objections to surface. We're forcing them down an alley of yes, 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 but we're not hearing the no that's going to cause that decline or that ghosting.
And so then we're shocked when it happens, but we
Yes,
shouldn't be because we've just buried the objections deep down. We haven't actually addressed any of them.
100%. So call it out. So, John, we're agreeing on a lot, and I'm glad to hear that. But what's not lining up for you yet? So I'm literally saying to them, I'm thrilled we are agreeing on everything. That's what I was hoping for. But what isn't in agreement for you yet? What's not lining up? And what this does is it forces honesty. So if they say nothing, everything's lining up, I can start to make the assumption or at least lean into the fact that we're on the same page and there may not be any objections that occurred yet. But if something did come up, I'm openly asking them, listen, let's just cut to the chase. What's not good for you yet?
Mm.
So we're interrupting the agreement pattern, which is contrary to forcing a line of yeses, right? I actually want to stop getting all the yeses and get them to be honest with me.
It feels counterintuitive, but it's the honesty. Exactly. That's what you're
Yeah.
looking for. You'd rather have brutal honesty rather than this fake optimism. You'd rather have a coach come in at halftime and say, "Hey guys, we're down 21-3. This is a problem," instead of the coach come in
Yeah.
at halftime and say, "You know what? It's okay. We're just going to get hyped up and we're going to be fine."
Yeah. That's exactly right. Number 3, ask commitment based questions. Now, this is where a lot of salespeople fall through the cracks. They'll say something like, do you agree? Are we on the same page? And what happens is they get agreement, but agreement is passive. We need commitment, which is directional. So instead, we may say something like, John, is this something you'd actually move forward with? Very common question, very simple question, but it's getting them to give you a small commitment. And again, people are going to say, wow, that's pretty forward. It's not forward. You're trying to get to the source of whether they're going to move forward or not, instead of hoping that they're going to move forward and following up for 3 or 4 weeks afterwards and not getting a response.
You could even think about it like dating in a sense. Like, why would we play the game of, is she interested in me? I don't know, but I'm just going to keep talking to her and hope that she's interested in me. And you just
Yes.
drag that along for weeks and weeks versus just coming out and saying, "Hey, you want to go out for a coffee? You want to, like, get to the point, cut to the chase," right? You're wasting your time if you're not.
It's funny you say that, John. When I was in college, I used to collect funny pins and I never wore them. I just kept them on a big piece of garment and hung them on my wall. And one of the pins said, tell me now before I spend $100 on drinks. So your point is well taken. We want the commitment. Is this going to happen or isn't it?
Going back to last week, this actually brings up a point about no that is interesting because there's this fear of they might say no. You're saying good. If they're going to
Yeah.
say no, let them say it now.
Yes. Let them say no to you verbally, not non verbally by not getting back to you. Because at least
100%.
verbally, you have a chance to give a counterpoint or a reason, or per the strata framework, you have a way to reframe what you're talking about so it fits more into their reality.
And if it still doesn't work, that's 20 minutes down the drain, not 20 weeks of waiting.
That's a great reframe. Yes, that is exactly right. Number 4, make them choose between 2 paths. John, you're talking about your podcast and your phenomenal production services, the production services that make this show float and excel. And you say to them, Mr. Prospect, do you see this as something you're going to move on now or maybe something you'll revisit later? So, no middle ground gives you your real answer. So, you're giving them that dichotomy. Either you're moving forward or you're revisiting later, Pick one. And this is going to terrify a lot of salespeople because they're going to say, well, what if they say we'll revisit later? Then you know what you have to talk about and what you have to get to. You know that you have an objection you need to overcome. And again, I want to emphasize this is far better than them telling you they're not going to revisit you at all.
Sure. And that's a note that you could put in your CRM, an opportunity if you stay organized, because organization is so important, right, in business development, to
Amen.
follow up and to loop around and get back to them. So that's not necessarily a missed opportunity. It's really, really crucial information to put down.
Well, and listen, this is valid. I have had numerous times where I was going to do something on my house in the summer and it just didn't work out. So I revisited it in the winter or the next
Yeah.
summer. And that's why we have follow up routines and tickler files in our CRM.
And to your point, sometimes it's not even the follow up in the CRM that makes all the difference. Sometimes there's people that I've stayed in touch with and pitched to and all that. And at the moment I least expect, when I had totally written them off, all of a sudden they come out of nowhere and they say, "Hey, John, I need some help on my podcast." And I'm like, wow, I almost forgot you existed. I don't say that to them, of course, but
Yeah,
that's just the nature of these things. So we can't always take a no or a not yet at face value.
correct. And number 5, John, and if you read the book, Own the Room, How to Communicate to Be Seen, Heard, and Respected, this is going to hit home. We're going to anchor it, and we're going to anchor it to a real outcome. So, Mr. Prospect, if this doesn't change, what happens? Now, the agreement has stakes attached to it. So, we're getting them to actually future pace and think about what's going to happen if things don't change now. So if you don't start this podcast today, Mr. Prospect, to help you get more prospects and grow your business, what happens? What are you going to do instead?
I
And
like that.
that silence at the end of that is deadly.
Ooh, yeah, because all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, shoot. I know he's right."
Yeah. Yeah. The best thing you can hear from somebody at that point is for them to say, I don't know what happens. Exactly right.
Mhm.
Because what's going to happen is things are going to remain either the same. And if you liked the same, you wouldn't be calling me, or they're going to decline. And then you're going to be in a real bind.
Yeah, and you could translate that to any product or service, right? With Orchestrate, you just think about AI and how it's exploded and how not using it is really foolish at this point to a certain extent, right? You're going to fall behind. That's future pacing in a way. Like, do you want to use the same old AIs that everybody else is using, or do you want to have a tool that actually helps you stand out and transforms your business?
Yeah. And it's kind of funny because I ran into somebody the other day that wanted to talk about Orchestrate. And they said, you know what? I don't really use AI. Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yep.
No problem. But at least you're telling me no now.
Yeah.
And then I don't have to worry about following up with you later. So I think no's are great. And I think companies that do this yes chain are missing the boat and they're teaching their salespeople the wrong skills. Feel free
That
to send hate mail directly to me.
and there will be, but
Yeah,
that's reflective of the close rates. And so
correct.
again, future pacing, what happens when you do the same thing that's not working over and over again? You get the same result, right? Isn't that insanity or something? So
And
there
that's the
you go.
definition of insanity. Yep.
You got that 10 to 20% close rate. Congratulations. You could also future pace positively, right?
Yes, without a doubt.
Imagine if I'm 6 months down the road and in a podcast case, I have a loyal audience of people checking out my podcast and a steady stream of content, that kind of thing. Now that's a more positive future pacing.
Correct. Or what are you going to name your podcast? How long is it going to be? What's your audience going to be like? You future pace them into it. And what does your future look like 6 months into a once weekly podcast where you're bringing guests on? What results are you looking for? So you're getting them to future pace into that. So yes, positive action is equally good future pacing. Let's review the 5 steps. Number 1, translate agreement into action. When they say, yep, that makes sense, you come back with, does it make sense enough to act on? Because we want them to move from understanding to decision. Number 2 is interrupt the agreement pattern. Call it out. Hey, Mr. Prospect, we're agreeing on a lot, and I love that. But what's not lining up for you yet? You're getting them to force honesty into the conversation. Number 3, ask commitment-based questions, not garbage like, do you agree? Instead, Mr. Prospect, is this something you would actually move forward with? Because remember, agreement is passive where commitment is directional. Number 4, make them choose between 2 paths. So do you see this something as you would move on now, or is this something you would revisit later? Because remember, when you don't offer them a middle ground, you're getting the real answer. Because the last thing you want is for somebody to say, I don't know, not sure, I'm undecided, because that leaves you in this purgatory that you're going to have a hard time getting out of. Last, again, part of the Strata framework, the first A in Strata is anchoring. Anchor it to a real outcome. Mr. Prospect, if this doesn't change, what happens? So now you're making the agreement that they've made with you, you're making it have stakes. You're making it have consequences. Because, John, the bottom line is this: agreement feels good for both parties because it's a pressure valve release for them, and you're thinking, woohoo, this is great, but it doesn't move anything. And whereas commitment feels heavier, it should, because that's exactly why it matters.
Mm-hmm. And that's the point. You got to send this, all those messages that you get that are like, hey, Jake, if I could triple your sales in the next 2 months, would you be
Throw those
interested
out
in
the
that?
window. Throw them out the window. You deserve to have a low close rate.
Yep, and I block and I mark those as spam. But if we had the patience and if we were better, really good humans that were out in the world to try to help people, which we are with the Own the Room podcast, but if we were even better humans, we would take this episode and send that link directly to them and say, hey, this is the false yes. You might be getting some yeses, but you're not actually getting commitment. It's that gap between acknowledgement and commitment like you're talking about.
It's been tempting, John, with some of the DMs I get on LinkedIn, these garbage outreaches that I get. I've been tempted to just link an episode that talks about garbage outreach or things like that and just send it back to them. I don't have time though.
Exactly. With the amount that we get, we don't have time. And that might actually help them out, though. But if you know somebody, you probably don't know somebody, hopefully, who's doing that kind of garbage outreach. But maybe you know somebody who's struggling with outreach and they're thinking to themselves, how do I actually bridge this gap from acknowledgement to commitment? This is the episode to check out. Those 5 things that you just mentioned, Jake, absolutely game changing. I especially loved number 5 there, future pacing. So important. So thanks for sharing. And you keep dropping all this good knowledge on us, Jake, for free. It's kind of crazy.
My pleasure.
Thanks for checking out Own the Room with Jake Stahl. If you've gotten value from this episode, share it with the solopreneur in your life who wants to know how to communicate to be seen, heard, and respected. Review and rate the show wherever you check out podcasts. And grab your copy of Own the Room, How to Communicate to be Seen, Heard, and Respected. We'll catch you next week on Own the Room.